Welkom bij de Podcast Facilitair. Mijn naam is Gerard de Velde van Eager People en met deze podcast willen wij van Eager People jou graag inspireren met mooie verhalen uit het facilitaire vakgebied. In deze aflevering kun je luisteren naar een interview dat is opgenomen op het World Workplace Meets Facility for Future event dat plaatsvond in Amsterdam op 20, 21 en 22 maart 2019. Dit event werd georganiseerd door IFMA en FMN. We waren daar als Eager People present met onze eigen vintage Volkswagenbus die we hadden ingericht als podcaststudio. In deze podcaststudio deden we interviews met facility professionals van over de hele wereld. Je zult bij dit interview dus iets meer achtergrond horen dan je normaal gewend bent, maar de verhalen zijn er niet minder om. In deze aflevering van de Podcast Facilitair kun je luisteren naar een interview met Gordon Wright, Director of Workplace voor HOK. HOK is een wereldwijd werkend bedrijf dat gespecialiseerd is in het ontwerpen van werkomgevingen. Ze doen ontwerp, architectuur, engineering en het plannen van het inrichten van werkomgevingen. Ze doen dit met in totaal 24 kantoren wereldwijd en ruim 1700 medewerkers. In dit interview hebben we het over de toekomst van de werkomgeving, de rol van productiviteit als maatstaf van succes en het gevaar van trends in technologie. Heel veel plezier met dit interview met Gordon Wright van HOK. So first I would like to invite you to introduce yourself.
Okay.
What is your name and where you work, and then we'll go from there.
Great. My name is Gordon Wright, and I work for HOK. And my role at HOK is I lead a practice focused on workplace, a global practice focused on the workplace. And HOK is one of the largest design and architectural firms in the world.
How did you end up at HOK?
It's a long journey. My undergraduate degree was in economics, and I went into development on the project management side, and I became a little disenfranchised with what I was doing, so I went back to study and thought I wanted to be a professor.
And why was that?
I felt like the first time I went through school, I went to school to get a degree, to get a job, and the second time I went to learn, and then I became engaged on what I was learning. And very different, first time I went I was young, right out of high school, and the second time I went as an adult. That going back to school and kind of learning about what I was interested in and who I was allowed me to be more focused on what I wanted to do.
Yep.
So while I went back and I studied art history and I studied art and I studied architecture, it really was I stayed in the construction industry but went to the design side versus on focusing on development or project construction.
Did you have any mentors in those days or visionaries or people that inspired you?
I would say people outside of the industry that I was in who really were more mentors around me as a person rather than career mentors, but to remind me to pursue happiness and that the paycheck would come if I was happy and engaged in what I was doing. And I even had a professor who told me not to go to get my PhD. He thought that I would become disenfranchised with the academic world, that I was too entrepreneurial, and that I would be frustrated in the academic world. And he became one of my best friends. He was my professor, and now he's one of my dear friends. So,
cool.
Yeah.
So that was good advice, right?
I think so. I mean, looking back, yes. I still maybe someday will go back and complete a PhD, but it will be for learning. It won't necessarily be for career.
Are you thinking about some form of legacy for yourself?
I don't know so much legacy.
So what does this word mean to you? Because I'm not sure if it also has a negative connotation.
Yeah, I think I jumped on the negative side, and I don't think a legacy is negative, but I also think I don't want to work for a legacy. I'd rather work for the satisfaction and the happiness and the here and now of helping an industry and what's going on. And if I think of, you mentioned child on the way, I have two boys. What I hope I'd leave as a legacy for them and what I've done is to show that you can change paths, but to go for what you're interested in and what interests you and excites you My oldest was born in the middle, at the very end of this venture I took to go back, and a lot of people thought I was crazy to go back to university as an adult, to change, to walk away from a career. But he got to see it from the very beginning of his life. He didn't know about what I did before, and he just saw the second half, so to speak. But I think for him, I hope, and his brother, that would be, to think about it personally, that it's set your own path and don't be afraid to say, you know what, I'm not happy, or I'm looking for something else and it's time to change.
I'm also interested in the difference between cultures. So what are your impressions of the Dutch culture?
I've been to the Netherlands many times. It's probably, I think, the 7th or 8th time I've been here. So worked here, done conferences, have friends who have lived here. I've been in 2 cities in the Netherlands, so not a big broad swath.
Which ones? Amsterdam
and Rotterdam. And The Hague a little bit too, but it's kind of, I almost consider, as an American, I kind of consider that just an adjunct to Amsterdam. I see a lot of similarity, but significant difference. I see this as maybe a European feeling that the Netherlands also has, being in Europe, is there seems to be a more awareness and appreciation for family and downtime in the Netherlands and in Europe in general than there is in the U.S. We talk about it a lot in the U.S. We talk about how important family is. We talk about how important it is to get away. And yet there's an expectation that you will be on 24/7. It's not quite literally 24/7, but that there's an expectation that you are always ready to go. You don't have a bad day. You don't have an off hour. You are raring and ready to go. And I think that's a little bit of what we're known for in the world. And a lot of it's hyperbole, frankly. Human beings can't handle that. There's lots of studies which show that the ultimate working day is 6 hours, 4 days a week. That would come out to 24 hours. And if you look at the normal American job, there's an expectation of about approximately 40 hours a week, minimum. And if you talk to most of the people in the industry that I'm in the design industry, 40 hours is done by Wednesday.
Yeah.
And you got 2 days to go.
Yeah.
So I do think that there is in practice, a more embracing of that in European culture than there is in the United States. In the United States, we love to talk about it, but I don't think we practice it very well.
Yeah. So is there a way to change this?
I think I don't know if there's a way to change it. I think it starts with awareness that's a problem. And I do see that I see in my son. My oldest son is 18 years old. He's very aware that he doesn't want to work all day long. And he's not lazy. But he's looking for ways to say, I want to contribute, I want to accomplish things, but I also want the freedom to travel, to spend time with my friends, the people I care about, and step away from it. I don't think they're willing to take on the burden that many people have in the U.S. There's this feeling that it's very real, that you must be ready to go all the time because that's what's required to get ahead, to be successful.
Yeah. I was thinking maybe there should be thought leaders or gurus or inspiring people or trying to change the culture,
I think there are.
Leadership,
There's a significant number of people in leadership roles acknowledging it, talking about what the fallout, the negativity, the negative things that happen to human beings. But I think as a general culture, there's still this fictitious notion of we're the hardest working and we are the great innovators, and God forbid if that culture, if you ever say, I'm going to step away a little bit here, it's almost seen as weakness. And I don't think it's weakness. I honestly don't. I think some of the people that I admire are leaders who can step away, and not even leaders, but just people who know when they've had enough to say, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to come back revived. I'm going to come back refreshed. We talk in the United States about taking holiday, taking vacation. And so many of us, including I find myself doing this, we take work with us on the holiday. So we don't enjoy the experience as much as we should or could. Those around us, our family, our friends that we take the holiday with, we're always going off to take a call or do work, so it's not as enjoyable for them. And I don't think you come back from that holiday as refreshed and revived as you could be.
But maybe we should talk also a bit about HOK. How did this name come about, and what does HOK stand for?
Well, first let's start with what it stands for. It's 3 partners, 3 architects who formed the company in the 1950s. HOK stands for, and I have to get this right, Helmuth, Obata, and Katzenbaum. It stumbled me. So those are the last names of the 3 founders. And one of those, Mr. Obata, is still actively working as an architect today, and I believe he's 94 years old.
Wow, that's impressive, huh?
Yes, the firm's been around about 65 years.
And how about the ownership?
Ownership is employee-owned. So everybody in the firm has an opportunity to be an owner.
And then you become a partner, or?
To some degree, there's a promotion track separate from ownership. But every employee, no matter what role you're in, has an opportunity to become a stockholder, a shareholder in the firm.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Okay. So you can buy stock?
It's awarded to you based on your performance and the company's performance. The structure of the organization says that all the ownership is not just going to be at the top of the organization. There's still we call it we have a management board. We have several boards that govern the organization, and then we have an executive committee who makes kind of the final decision, like a board of directors would for a publicly traded entity. But everyone has a say, and everybody can, to some degree, own some of the organization and benefit in the success of the organization.
It's quite large. I read somewhere 1,700.
Yeah, it's about 1,700.
Yeah?
Yes.
So, and you're one of the biggest in this industry.
We are one of the
US?
larger firms. Yeah.
I thought I read something about Silicon Valley, that you've done some projects there as well.
I used to know the statistics and I'm forgetting, but we've done work all over the world. We have 20 some odd offices. I always remember the total number, but
23, I think.
23 or 24 offices. Yeah. And our start was in St. Louis. Our second office was San Francisco. So you ask about Silicon Valley. Our San Francisco office is very important, not only because of its legacy, but because of all the activity going on in that part of the world for the last 25 years, maybe longer.
But you don't have like this big project like we did Apple, or we did like this?
We do things like that, again, and nothing particularly for a client, although we did what I'm going to call a spec building recently in the Silicon Valley, which is very close to the new Apple Donut, which I have to be careful about how I talk about it, but Apple has taken that entire campus, and we've heard through Apple employees that it's the most desirable place to work in the Apple empire in the Silicon Valley. So we did that as a spec building.
What is a spec building?
It's basically done as an office building for a tenant yet to be named. So the developer was very interested in building a building, had a piece of land, and building what I'm going to call a state-of-the-art workplace building that would be attractive, both physically and attractive to work within, would provide the type of amenities and space that would attract a high-level company to want to come in and take part of that as office space. So we use that term in the U.S. I don't know what term is equivalent to it in the Netherlands or Europe, but we kind of talk about when you design and construct a building without necessarily for a specific tenant.
Yeah. So does HOK have like a certain take on workplaces? Do you have like a philosophy?
I think we do. And it's a big part of the overall practice. It's a big percentage of the firm's revenues. We're very focused on places where people go to work. And that's kind of how we talk about it. Often we think it's just about corporations. And I think it is much larger than that. Any place where people congregate to perform a task, perform their jobs. I mean, the home office, the coffee shop, the cafe is a workplace as well. But we have a philosophy that it's places where people go to work versus the tower, the high-rise building, the campus in the suburban area. We think it's all of those things.
So does this also reflect something of your company culture? Are you like a humble
we are.
office?
We are. We, architects can be, designers can be a little self-absorbed with the buildings and the spaces that they create. And I think that we can put the architect, the designer on the same pedestal that sometimes we put artists on. The genius of the architect, the genius of the artist. And often what you forget and don't understand, or we don't realize in that, is it takes a team. It takes a village to create those wonderful designs. It's usually not just one individual. And so HOK kind of has that woven into our philosophy. We started in St. Louis, which is what I'm going to call a working class. It's known for, makes beer. That's what they're known for, Anheuser-Busch. It's not a huge city, but it's an old city in the United States. And so we started. Those are our foundations. And HOK likes to sometimes say, we don't brag a lot about what we do. We let our work speak for itself. And so there is a bit of humbleness, particularly in an industry where you have to rah your work. I think that as a firm, sometimes maybe we should talk more about what we do. But we try to be I think it goes back to, again, where we started. We try to do excellent work that meets the needs of our clients versus work that feeds our ego.
Yeah. And this is opposed to bigger, maybe, well, not necessarily bigger, but other companies.
Every firm, in across industries, in industry sectors, but I think within the design sector, HOK prefers to let the work speak for itself rather than be braggadocious. And it doesn't mean our competitors are out bragging about the work, but that's just the kind of way we like to do it. Now, sometimes we're a bit self-critical and we say we need to learn to talk more about our work, to get more work, to do great work. You have to get more projects, more opportunities. And we think about workplace. It's, being at this conference, it's out telling the story about what we think is coming, the impact it's going to have on the workplace, and what employers, owners of the workplaces need to do to be prepared to get the talent, get the people to come to those spaces that they want them to come to.
Do you have some insights for the future of workplace?
Well, I don't, there's no such thing as a crystal ball. At least I don't have one. Maybe others do. What I would say is we've had workplaces for a long, long time. I think in the last 3 to 5 years, there's a much heightened awareness on the workplace. We've been designing office buildings. We've been designing buildings as a race, as the human race, for many, many centuries. So this is not a new thing. I think there's a heightened awareness is that people, it's about people. Spaces are about people. And people won't go to a space unless that space makes them comfortable, unless they want to be there. We saw that a few years ago when many companies went through downsizing and sent people home to work in home offices. It was very difficult to get them to come back. At home, they had comfort. They had choice. I can be in the garden. I can be in the living room. I can be in the kitchen. I can work from anywhere. Nobody cares where I work from. When I come to the office, here's your chair, here's your desk. There's the lunchroom, the cafeteria. That's all you get. And I think now we're realizing that if we treat people that way, and I'm purposely saying people, not employees, but if we treat people that way, they'll go away. And so what I believe is coming is just really about the heightened awareness. The second thing I'd say is with this heightened awareness, the workplace is crawling with technology. And as our homes and all these other places, in order to do our tasks, most jobs are now relying heavily on some form, if not multiple forms of technology. I believe a tenet of a great workplace is choice. And I think I said that earlier. Suddenly now, the people have much more choice. They can vote with their phone. Their opinion now is empowered by all the technologies, the applications that can reside in that phone. And in some ways, it's up to the employer, the owner of the workplace, to sort of say, I hear you, and I'm going to provide for you, rather than to say, no, you can't have that. Because I think people will vote with their feet in the workplace. If I can't have something that I feel it can be provided to me somewhere else, or I think it's an important part of me feeling good about the place I work and feeling I have the tools to do my job, I will vote with my feet and I'll walk somewhere else.
Will be gone. Yeah. I'm also curious about in the US. Is there a different way, or do they invest more in the workplace than in Europe? Or
well, first I'd say spinning's one thing. I think philosophically, I believe, and I think a lot of practitioners that help organizations with workplace believe that Asia and Europe are ahead of the United States, maybe by 3 to 5 years. And I think it's because there's been a greater awareness of the office is just another place to work, and we better accommodate the people or they won't want to come to the office. And I think that feeling has been, certainly in Europe, much more aware. Now, Asia is a little bit different. But certainly Europe has been ahead of the United States in accepting that belief and doing something about it. So I don't think the cost per square foot is relative to cost in a market, geographical costs. I don't think it's much different. I think the thinking is ahead. I almost said more advanced. I think it's more ahead of the U.S. is trying to catch up, has become more aware in the last 3 to 5 years. But I think Europe in general is still ahead, particularly if you look at some key markets. I look at London, for example. London's been doing things for 5, 6, 7 years that are just now being sort of normalized in the United States. And then I think culture comes into that as well. We talked a little bit earlier about how you feel about work, how you treat work. The notion I said, the always on idea is that, which is part of the cultural of the U.S. is a little bit still remains of you're not working unless you're in the office.
To frame something as a workplace, it's become more vague, as you said that.
It's muted. The lines are muted.
Yeah, it's very unclear. So if you frame something as a workplace, that could be anywhere. My personal definition of work is everything that I do, which I don't like. That's my definition of work. It sounds very cynical, but I'm always thinking about words, what do words mean? So if you say this is a workplace, what does it mean?
I honestly think there's many right definitions for that one, and I think it's personal too. But I often say it's a place where I go to perform tasks or perform work, and I liked what you said, things I don't like to do, but where I have the tools to do it as effectively as possible. There's places that are beautiful, but they're not very effective for working. In the forest, for example. It's
no
beautiful.
Wi-Fi, yeah.
There's no Wi-Fi. It may be great if I'm a writer. It may be great if I'm a painter and I need to get away, and sometimes we all need to do that, but it's probably not terrific for my industry if you're a designer and you have to sit with a computer and design something because it's impractical.
Yeah. So do you have something you always try to put in a project?
I think there's things that designers do that we like, that signature. We like that thing that we get known for, either as a firm or an individual designer.
It's like an aesthetic thing, right?
Yes,
yeah?
And I think there's some people that are very good at having their palette, so to speak, like a painter, listening to the client and then using their palette, what things they like to do to address the client needs. I think we know some architects out there, the starchitects, if you will, that have a building or a space they're going to design, and you're going to hire them to do that. And if you don't like that building, you probably won't hire. I think in the workplace, we have less chance of getting away with that. I think there's too many voters. Again, we vote with our feet, and I could create a beautiful space that's impractical, that's noisy, that's uncomfortable, that doesn't provide choice, and people will vote with their... And we see this all the time. They will go to a different floor, they'll go to a different building, they'll go to a different campus, or they just won't go there at all. And I think for some people, it's not even a conscious choice. Again, we are trying to define what is a workplace. For me, it's the tools I have to do my job. I feel comfortable and I'm empowered. If I don't feel comfortable and I don't feel empowered, I'm probably not going to want to go there.
So I like this way of thinking. You really try to look at things with a sort of X-ray vision. What is structural and what is decorative, or what is real and what is fake. I'm thinking a lot about trends. And what I see is, for instance, people just keep copying each other, So in the Netherlands, at this moment, we have a trend. It's called happiness at work. So now everybody's tweeting about happiness at work. And then 6 months from now, everybody will be talking about vested because we heard this keynote and then this will be the next thing. So we jump from trend to trend. Do you recognize something? Or
Absolutely. I think it's human nature. We get caught up in it. So we come here and we think we're going to learn about the next thing that I can take back to my employees, my company, my clients, and help them. And I think it's just embedded in us. To make money, you have to be successful. And to be successful, I want to know the new thing before somebody else knows the new thing. I also think that sometimes we get caught up in trends. And that, to me, is less valuable. I think one of the worst things we see is organizations trying to emulate other organizations. Oh, I want to be like Google. I want to be like Amazon. I want to be like Microsoft. I think that's dangerous because I think that's when you begin to do things that are maybe not authentic for your own people, your own organization, and it becomes almost like chasing, they did it, so I have to do it. And I think that's the downside of the trend or the next greatest thing, the flash in the pan, whatever you want to call it, where it may be inauthentic for your organization, may be actually counter to your culture. And people pick up on that. We all understand that if we go into a meeting or an arrangement with other people and it doesn't feel authentic, doesn't feel good, you don't want to be there. And so I think that's one of the things that can happen with trends that can be actually very negative is that I see a successful organization, I adapt what they want to do for me, and it's a bad fit because I'm not Google, I'm not insert company name here. I think in our world today, and technology is part of it, authenticity is a hard thing to come by. We are used to muted conversations. We're used to having multiple conversations at the same time using technology. And when you take that into those personal relationships, take that into work relationships in the workplace, I think that's one of the things people are striving for. I mean, it's a human experience. The workplace is not something outside of our lives, right? It's what we do, using your definitions, things I don't like to do. I have to make a living. So I think that authenticity is a big part of what people want in a workplace, that what you give me is authentic to the culture of the organization that I've chosen to work for. And if it's inauthentic or it doesn't make sense, I think that those organizations are going to struggle, and they're going to struggle to get people to come to those places.
So is this also HOK philosophy, or is it your personal?
I think it's both. I think I mean, it's certainly influenced by our firm, and hopefully I influence what we do in the workplace practice. But I do think that our design aesthetic in general, when we talk about designing workplaces, and by the way, I will go back to that for a second. A workplace can be an office building, it can be a stadium, it can be a hospital, it can be a factory floor. You
have many places like this in.
You're probably ahead of us there. We're reimagine old spaces, but it's certain cities. San Francisco has a lot of this, quite a bit of this. But it can be, again, you wouldn't necessarily say this is wonderful until you come inside and see it reimagined. And if an organization were to take this space and it's part of their culture, and it could be a wonderful place to go to work. Now, if you came in and you were very stuffy and formal, this space probably wouldn't be a terrific place to put your office because it's not a formal space.
So you would put culture first, see what matches with the company culture.
Well, there's a saying by a famous business author that culture eats strategy for lunch. And I think we've talked about the Industrial Revolution, which was hundreds of years ago now, although it doesn't seem that long ago. And then we've had the technology revolution. You can kind of begin to see the 80s and 90s, and now we're having another revolution. I think that the workplace is being pulled by the technology. There's pros and cons to all of this. And we're human beings. Mm-hmm. And human beings, whether we can define it or not, we're accepting or reject culture. And if we're comfortable in it, we're going to be more accepting of it. If we're uncomfortable in it, we're going to be less accepting of it. And that applies across everything. Mm-hmm. And that's why I think that we're talking about human experience. We're talking about the feeling that people have in the space that they go to work. This is not something new. It's not something, it's not innovative. It's really been around a long time. We've just become much more aware of it in the last decade. And maybe not even a decade. But we're certainly talking about it much more in the last handful of years.
So can you expand a little bit on deep thinking in the workplace? Is that something
Well, yes,
means anything to you?
it does. And I think that
Or is it impossible?
I wouldn't say that it's impossible, but I think that our lives are so programmed, and I think this goes back. I'll speak for the culture I'm from, the United States. This always-on notion that I said earlier, it can kill us. And I think sometimes we design workplaces about effectiveness and efficiencies and all of these words we hear. How do we make employees more effective, more efficient? And we make business decisions, we make financial decisions on empowering our team to be more effective and more efficient. And I sometimes think in that we forget about the human factors. And what do we need as human beings to step away from the being effective and being efficient and recharge our batteries? Whether that's long-term, taking a holiday, a vacation time and going away from work altogether. Or is it 15 minutes in the work day where I can go someplace which is not about technology, it's not about enabling me, but it's about allowing me to recharge and rest.
Rest, yeah, that's a key word, I think.
And I think that one of the problems we have is a cost to the space. So there's a square meter, a square foot cost to the space. It's very hard to get a senior leader who's looking at bottom line performance, reporting to a board of directors to say, and I'm going to design in X square meters for people to rest.
Yeah.
Now, if we had a scientist in this conversation who studies this, they may say you actually get higher productivity, which we're all beginning to understand, even if we're not scientists, that people who are well supported, and part of is being off. Well, why do our bodies need to sleep? We have to turn off to refresh ourselves. And I do think that it's something that probably we're going to become more and more aware of is what I'm going to say, fully program these spaces, top to bottom. I take the entire building or the entire floor and I program every square meter, every square foot. Maybe there needs to be some spaces that are programmed differently. I'm not going to say not programmed, but are programmed differently to say it's a place for contemplation. It's a place to get away. And maybe these places need to be away from prying eyes. In other words, you could go take a nap. You could go to a yoga class. You could go listen to music, and nobody cares. It's okay to do that. I still think there's cultural barriers to that, to say in the workplace we have to be productive. And why are you doing yoga right now when it's during business hours? Why are you listening to music? Why are you sitting in a chair with your eyes closed? Get back. Let's go. We're
just not smart enough maybe to see the bigger picture, because it's easy to count the hours.
Very easy. I mean, it's the easiest thing we do. In productivity in a way, maybe a little bit more difficult with a knowledge worker, but if you think of the Industrial Revolution, why do we get machines? Because we could be more efficient. I could produce more widgets in an hour than I could in the old-fashioned way. And we still have that mentality ingrained in what we do.
Well, I see a parallel with money and value. It's easy to count money.
I think, and again, I'll go back to having two teenage boys, is they're success driven. I'm not going to say they're not success driven. Maybe some of that was instilled by culture, maybe some instilled by me, some about their personality. But they are also very aware that they don't want to work as much as I do. And I don't mean that in a martyr way, that, I work too hard. I just, the culture in general, and when I take time away and I'm with them, I try to unplug completely. And they remind me about that. I think we're going to begin to have a generation of people who are going to be much more aware of this sort of mindfulness, this sort of unplugging and stepping away.
Being in the room, so to speak.
Yes, and they're going to not accept the idea that I'm going to multitask all the time and I'm always going to be on. And my work day is going to be 6.5, and the half is when I'm sleeping. And then talk to many of them, and then even in the workplace, younger people, and not young kids, but young adults who are saying, I don't accept that. That's not how I want to live my life. I mean, you look back and how many hours we had to work 100 years ago, as opposed to now, to really get the same level of productivity. It's dramatically changed. I also think the holy grail is productivity. I'm kind of personally over that measure. I think it's a false measure. I think it's about, there's a lot more factors that go into productivity. And if we go back to the industrial age of how many hammers I can produce, we're no longer working on assembly lines. And I think that there's a lot more choice now in what we can do for a living to put food on our tables than to stand on an assembly line and make hammers. So I think that has changed too, and I think the next generation of people coming into the workforce are going to have maybe a more educated view of it. And I'm not saying that I agree with their educated view or it's the right view, but that there's greater and greater awareness of every generation of, are we just going to work all the time, or are we going to have time that's about me and my life, and work gets set aside for a bit, and then I come back and I'm ready to go back, and yes, certainly be productive, but I don't want to be on the treadmill of productivity.
It's also about what's natural and what's not, so as human beings we need rest. That's very natural. And I'm thinking about how a tree grows, we don't go measure the tree every day and say, okay, we want you to grow faster. Oh, of course there's an industry there as well, but some things they just take time. Also for a good wine or a good marriage, or there are some things that go slow, and we're always on the fast track, going. And that's the track to unhappiness in a way. And maybe technology should be judged by this frame. So does it make us a more happy person? And happy doesn't equal money or productivity, but happy is also slow things, just...
Well, I think we hear a lot about this now, about slowing our lives down, about stopping, and there's a saying in the United States, stopping to smell the roses. Do I have the time to enjoy? I actually think that the downfall of technology was, and go back to something I studied in economics, the industrial age, was about productivity. And when you own the means of production and capitalist, you get more out of your worker. I also think there became an awareness when we started to see worker strikes in Europe and the United States, where workers realized the conditions they were working within and started to say, I'm not going to work this way, and we're going to band together. And therefore unions came along, and that whole tradition that still exists. I think that we're going to get some coordinated and perhaps organized backlash on technology. The technology that we're always on, the technology that allows us to work anywhere, anytime, all the time. And I think that as a society, and it probably won't be individuals, maybe led by individuals, but as a society, we're going to start to see a groundwell, a springing up of the notion that I don't want to always be on, and I don't want technology to run my life. Now, we know all the great things it can do, but we also start to see some of the negativity, and it's not to say, artificial intelligence is a big bugaboo right now. I don't think it's all bad. It's just, are we managing or are we controlling it so that we continue to experience, or do we want this muted experience that we have of life done through our phone or done through a device? That's where I think that we have to get smarter and begin to think about, it's not all about productivity.
Did you ever consider putting like a forest into a design? Could you do more with real nature?
It's interesting. So this notion of biophilia, which includes a lot more than plants. We often think of it in the workplace as plants, living walls. It's much more than that. It's,
what did you call it?
Biophilia.
Uh-huh.
It's a scientific study around how natural things influence human behavior, human performance. And often in a workplace, it's a bit of a hermetic environment. We're sealed off. Buildings are sealed environments. They're controlled environments. So we see, plants on desks. We see, we've seen recently a trend for walls of plants, growing things inside. It helped create a cleaner, better air quality, etc. I don't know that anybody's tried that, but it's really interesting to think about. We were talking about earlier, places you go to get away, the forest. Could you create that as a place to get away within a building that actually is living and breathing? And
how about a thick bush of bamboo? And it would be so nice to escape, because you're always performing.
I like your idea. I don't know that I've seen lobbies, certainly high multi-story lobbies where there's a large plant or a large tree, but I don't know if I've ever seen a place to actually go and kind of hide to get away from everything else that's going on in the space.
So are you in a position to plug it into some project or client you're working with?
Sure. I think as a personally in what I do and in the firm I work for, absolutely, we're in a place to say, let's try this.
Do I need to say more, or do I challenge you in any way?
No, that was good. I saw the path you were leading me down. That would be. I would say I will make a point to have a conversation.
Some closing comments, maybe, about HOK, about your mission. Anything comes to mind?
Well, I'd say again, and it's one of the things that attracted me to the firm is we have some of the best and brightest in the world in terms of design talent, and we get to do projects across sectors. We do stadiums, we do hospitals, we do things that are for entertainment, we do things that are for healing of human beings, we do spaces where people climb in an elevator and go up 50 floors and have a beautiful view of the world. We do some things that are less glamorous than that too. But I think as a company, as a design firm, that we aspire to do things that are meaningful, that endure, that last, that aren't trendy. And probably the most important thing from my view of who I am as a person is why I would work there opposed to another firm is that we really genuinely care. It doesn't mean we always 100% get it right, because we're humans. We make miscalculations. We don't always hit the target. But our firm culture, strategy, what we strive for is to do great work that makes the client happy rather than great work that makes HOK happy. And when our clients are happy, we're really happy too. We could do wonderful work, what we think is wonderful work, and if the client's not happy, we're probably not going to be happy.
What should I teach my kid?
Oh, goodness. Oh, parenting is the hardest thing I've ever done and the most rewarding thing I've ever done. I have 2 beautiful boys. They're wonderful. I can think of a million things I've done wrong, and the few things I did right turned them in who they are. Their mother and I, we always try to show solidarity. We may not always see eye to eye on everything, but in front of them we see eye to eye on everything. And I think that's the one thing is the consistency. So they feel supported. They also feel rewarded, supported, and also corrected when needed consistently. And love, obviously. If you have love, it makes up for, I sometimes worry that, did I give too much? Should I not give enough to them? But when they tell me every day as an 18-year-old and 16-year-old that they love me, then I know that somewhere in there we did something right.
Suddenly makes me think of the next trend in facility management. Maybe it could be love.
The love room.
Yeah, I mean,
you have to be careful with HR.
No romantic love, but
we care about you, love.
Okay, this will be continued. Thank you so much for being here.
To meet you.
And have a great day.
Too.
Dankjewel voor het luisteren naar dit interview dat we opnamen op World Workplace Meets Facility for Future in Amsterdam. Deze podcast werd je aangeboden door Eager People. Ben je op zoek naar gedreven medewerkers voor facilitaire functies, op operationeel, tactisch of strategisch niveau? Dan denken we graag met je mee. Ook als je bestaande medewerkers of teams meer eager wilt maken, kunnen we jou van dienst zijn. En natuurlijk ook als je op zoek bent naar een nieuwe uitdaging of een nieuwe interimopdracht. Ik ben benieuwd wat je van deze aflevering vond. Heb je feedback voor ons? Zijn er onderwerpen die je graag zou willen terughoren? Of heb je een tip wie we eens zouden moeten interviewen? Wat je reactie ook is, stuur ons gerust even een berichtje via podcast@eagerpeople.nl of bel ons op 030 2011 762. Bedankt voor het luisteren en graag tot een volgende keer.